The heat of the midday sun pressed down on the small frontier town, turning the dust of the main street into a fine haze that clung to every boot and hemline. Wagons rattled in from the north, their iron rims groaning under the weight of cargo no one wanted to acknowledge. The cargo wasn't grain or lumber, it was human. A line of women stepped down from the back of the wagon, ankles bound, wrists shackled, their eyes lowered to the ground as though even looking up might bring punishment. The town folk had gathered in clusters, whispering. Some muttered in pity, others in scorn. A few men leaned against posts, smirking, their voices crude and careless. Near the blacksmith's post stood Samuel Hayes, a tall rancher with broad shoulders browned by years under the sun. His hand rested gently on the shoulder of his daughter, Emily, a bright-eyed girl of 8 whose innocence had not yet been crushed by the world's cruelty. She stared at the women, her small brows knitting together in confusion. Her eyes fixed on one of them, a girl who looked scarcely older than 20. Her dress was torn, dirt-stained, hanging off her frame as though it belonged to someone twice her size. Bruises marked her thin arms. Her dark hair fell in tangles across her face. But even beneath the mess, Emily saw something, a flicker of defiance in the way the woman held herself, her spine refusing to bow despite the weight of the chains. Emily tugged her father's coat. Her voice was no more than a whisper, but it pierced the heavy silence. "Daddy," she asked, her eyes wide with innocent fear, "is she dying?" The question struck Samuel harder than a bullet. He looked down at his daughter, then at the woman who swayed slightly as though her legs might give way beneath her. Her lips were cracked, her eyes hollow, yet there was still a stubborn flame buried deep in them. Dying, yes, but not dead. Not yet. Samuel's jaw tightened. "Not if I can help it," he muttered under his breath. The auctioneer barked out words, prices, offers, a cruel game of barter that treated human souls like cattle. Men shifted coins in their hands, measuring worth in silver instead of breath. Samuel stepped forward. "I'll take her." His voice was firm, steady, leaving no room for argument. The auctioneer blinked. "This one," he gestured toward the bruised woman. "She won't be of much use. Half-starved, broken spirit. Best leave her, Hayes." Samuel's gaze hardened. "I said I'll take her." The coins clattered into the auctioneer's palm, the sound sharp in the tense silence. The crowd's whispers rose. Some shook their heads. Others laughed under their breath. "Hayes has lost his mind. Taking home one of them." Samuel ignored them all. He strode forward, unfastening the shackles himself. The metal fell away with a dull clang against the wooden planks. The woman flinched at his nearness, her arms instinctively rising as though expecting a blow. Instead, Samuel spoke low, steady, as though taming a wild horse. "No one's going to hurt you here. Not while you're with me." Her eyes flicked up for the briefest second, meeting his. They were the color of storm clouds, haunted, unreadable, but alive. Emily, her small fingers wrapped around her father's calloused hand, tilted her head, studying the woman. "Can she come home with us, Daddy?" Samuel didn't answer at once. He looked at the bruised girl, standing fragile and silent in the street. Around them, the town murmured, judgment heavy in the air. But Samuel Hayes had made his choice long before the question was asked. "Yes, Emily," he said softly, resting his hand against his daughter's hair. His gaze never left the broken woman. "She's coming home." The little girl smiled, bright and sure, as though her father had just promised the world. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the chained woman's lips twitched, the faintest shadow of something that might one day become a smile. The Hayes Ranch sat at the edge of the plains, a spread of weathered fences and golden fields that stretched toward the horizon. As the wagon pulled up, the house loomed, a sturdy timber home with wide porches and smoke curling from the chimney. It was not grand, but it was safe. Samuel helped his daughter down first, then turned to the woman. She hesitated at the step, her bound hands clutching her ragged shawl. Samuel reached out, not forcing, just offering. For a long heartbeat, she didn't move, her storm-gray eyes locked on his. Then, with trembling fingers, she placed her hand in his, and he steadied her to the ground. Emily skipped ahead toward the house, her voice carrying back in excitement. "Mrs. Callahan, we brought someone." The door swung open, and the housekeeper bustled out, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes narrowed the moment they landed on the stranger. "Samuel Hayes, what's this you've done?" Samuel met her sharp stare without flinching. "She's staying," Mrs. Callahan huffed, muttering under her breath, but she ushered them inside. The woman's steps faltered as she crossed the threshold. The warmth of the hearth, the smell of bread baking, the simple comfort of chairs and curtains, everything seemed to overwhelm her. Her hand brushed the doorframe as though she feared it might vanish if she leaned too hard. "Emily," Samuel said gently, "show her where she can wash." The little girl took the woman's hand without hesitation, tugging her toward the back room where a copper tub waited, steaming. The woman froze at the sight of it. She glanced at Samuel, uncertain. "You're free to use it," he said softly. "Chains don't belong in my house." Something flickered in her eyes, doubt, fear, and something else she couldn't name. Slowly, she let Emily lead her away. Later, when she emerged, the grime and blood washed away, she looked almost unrecognizable. Damp hair clung to her shoulders. Her skin, though pale and scarred, glowed in the firelight. But she wore the same torn dress, clutching it tightly around herself as though afraid anyone might take it from her. Emily came rushing in with a folded bundle clutched in her arms. "Here," she said, holding it out. "It was Mama's. I think it will fit you." The woman froze. Her gaze darted to Samuel, as if to ask permission. Samuel's voice was steady but kind. "It's yours if you want it." Hands shaking, she accepted the bundle. The dress was simple cotton, soft blue, worn from years of washing but carefully kept. She held it against her chest, as though it were a treasure. For a moment, her throat worked as if words might rise, but none came. When she returned again, now in the dress, Emily clapped her hands in delight. "See, Daddy? She looks like a lady now." The woman's cheeks colored faintly and used to praise. She lowered her gaze, as if embarrassed by the weight of their kindness. Emily tilted her head. "What's your name?" The question hung in the air. The woman's lips parted, but no sound came. She searched the room, eyes clouded with panic. I don't remember," she whispered finally, voice hoarse, as if even admitting that truth hurt. Emily frowned. "Everybody has a name." Samuel's gaze softened. He leaned forward, his voice low and certain. "Then we'll give you one. How about Grace?" The woman's eyes lifted at the word. Grace. It rolled across her mind like a foreign language, yet something inside her stirred, like the first breath after drowning. "Grace," she repeated quietly, the sound trembling on her lips. Samuel nodded once. "Grace it is." Emily beamed, throwing her arms around the woman's waist. "Welcome home, Grace." For the first time, Grace's lips curved, not a smile yet, but the fragile promise of one. The chains might be gone, but in that moment, standing in a borrowed dress with a borrowed name, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Hope. The days on the Hayes Ranch began with the sun spilling gold across the fields, the roosters crowing, and the steady rhythm of life. Horses to feed, fences to mend, meals to prepare. For Emily, it was routine. For Samuel, survival. For Grace, it was bewildering. The first morning she woke in a real bed, she startled at the softness beneath her. She had slept curled on the far edge of the mattress, blanket clutched tight, as though expecting it to be snatched away at any moment. When the morning light filtered through the window, she blinked, disoriented. A pang of fear shot through her. Where am I? Who will come for me now? Then Emily's small knock came at the door. "Grace? Are you awake?" Grace's breath caught. No one had ever knocked for her. No one had cared whether she woke or not. Slowly, she answered, yes. The door creaked open, and Emily peeked in, her braids bouncing. "Papa says you can come to breakfast." Grace hesitated. Her instinct was to stay hidden, but the child's eager smile tugged her forward. She followed Emily to the kitchen, every step heavy with caution. Mrs. Callahan was at the stove, frying bacon. Samuel sat at the table, already pouring coffee. He glanced up as Grace entered, offering a small nod. Nothing forced, nothing demanding, just quiet acknowledgement. "Morning," he said. Grace murmured the word back, barely audible, and slid into the seat Emily patted for her. The plate set before her held eggs, bacon, and bread, more food than she'd had in one sitting for as long as she could remember. Her hands trembled as she picked up the fork. Old habits clawed at her. Eat quickly. Hide what you can before it's taken. Almost without thinking, she tucked half the bread beneath her sleeve. Samuel saw, but said nothing. Instead, he kept talking with Emily about the horses. Grace's cheeks burned. Slowly, she replaced the bread on her plate, forcing herself to eat openly. The taste of warm food was both foreign and overwhelming. That afternoon, Samuel found her in the yard, watching the chickens peck at the dirt. "You ever gathered eggs before?" he asked. She shook her head. "Come on, then." He handed her a basket. At first, she flinched at the birds' sudden flutters, nearly dropping the basket. Samuel didn't laugh, didn't scold. He simply showed her how to slip her hand beneath the hen, gentle and firm, retrieving the egg without harm. After a while, Grace managed one herself. She held it up as though it were made of glass. Emily clapped. "You did it, Grace." A faint warmth spread in Grace's chest. She didn't remember the last time anyone had cheered for her. Nights were the hardest. Sleep dragged her back into shadows she could not escape. Chains biting her wrists, rough laughter, cold floors. More than once, Samuel woke to the sound of her muffled screams. He never entered her room, never forced her to face him in those moments. Instead, he sat quietly on the porch outside, lantern burning, until she calmed. She would catch glimpses of his silhouette through the curtain, a silent guard against the dark. Emily, too, had her ways. One night, she tiptoed into Grace's room with a small oil lamp and a worn storybook. "When I get scared, Mama used to read to me. Maybe it'll help you." Grace, trembling from her nightmare, let the child curl beside her. Emily read haltingly, stumbling over words, but her voice was soft and steady. By the time the story ended, Grace's breathing had evened, her head resting lightly against the girl's shoulder. For the first time in years, she slept without fear. Weeks passed, and Grace began to change. The hollows in her cheeks filled. Her eyes, once blank, began to hold light. She laughed once, just once, when Emily spilled a pail of water over her own boots, splashing them both. The sound startled her as much as anyone else, but Samuel caught it, and his mouth curved into a small, proud smile. She was not healed, not yet. The shadows lingered. She still startled at raised voices, still guarded her plate at mealtimes. But each day, in small ways, she remembered what it felt like to be human. One evening, as the three of them shared supper, Emily declared, "Grace is part of our family now." Samuel looked at Grace, giving her the choice to deny or accept. Her throat tightened. The word family was a fragile thing, dangerous to hope for. And yet, she nodded, eyes damp but certain. "Yes," she whispered, "family." And in that quiet moment, with the fire crackling and Emily's small hand wrapped around hers, Grace felt something she had thought long dead, the beginning of belonging. The town of Willow Creek had a way of noticing everything, and judging even more. Dusty streets, sagging wooden sidewalks, and a single main street lined with a general store, a saloon, and the church at its center formed the stage for daily gossip. And gossip, it seemed, followed Grace wherever she went. It started the moment she stepped into the general store with Emily. "Who's the new lady at the Hayes Ranch?" whispered a woman behind the counter. Her voice was low, venom laced with curiosity. Grace froze, her fingers tightening around the basket of flowers she carried. Her heartbeat quickened. Don't look, don't speak, don't draw attention. But Emily, as usual, was oblivious. "She's my friend," the girl declared loudly, tugging Grace's hand. Heads turned. Whispers rose like wind through dry grass. "Friend, is she?" said a man lounging by the shelves, voice rough. "Thought she was one of those from the auction." Grace's cheeks burned. The words were familiar, like the chains that had once held her. She clenched her jaw, staring at the floor, trying not to flinch. Samuel arrived just then, broad-shouldered and calm, with Emily perched on his hip. He scanned the murmurs and frowned. "Excuse me," he said, voice steady, echoing through the sudden quiet. "She's a guest in my home and my family. You will treat her with the respect that deserves, or keep your opinions to yourselves." The man smirked, shrugging. "Just stating what everyone's thinking, Hayes." Samuel's gaze hardened. "Then think it in silence." The tension dissipated like a storm passing, but not entirely. Grace felt the weight of the town's eyes, judgment pressing down on her like invisible chains. She wanted to flee, to hide in the safe corners of the ranch, away from their whispers. Later that afternoon, she wandered to the churchyard alone, seeking solace in the quiet shade of the old oak trees. She knelt by a patch of wildflowers, brushing dirt from her hands, when she heard the voices. "Samuel Hayes has a strange one living in his house. She can't be anything but trouble. Mark my words. Did you see how she looks? Half-starved, scared, no family." Grace felt her chest tighten. The world she had begun to trust suddenly felt fragile again. She bit her lip, wanting to vanish. But a gentle hand touched her shoulder. Samuel knelt beside her, eyes soft but firm. "Don't listen," he said quietly. "Not to them. Your past does not define your future." I'm scared," she whispered, tears welling. Samuel pulled her into a careful embrace, the kind that said he would not let the world take her again. "I know, but you have a choice. You can let their words pull you back, or you can choose to grow, to heal. And I'll be here every step." Grace sniffled, resting her head against his chest. Emily, having followed silently, climbed into her side, offering her warmth. For the first time that day, Grace allowed herself a small breath of relief. That evening, around the dinner table, Samuel spoke gently but firmly. "You have a home now, and home protects you. Nobody else's opinion changes that." Grace's voice was small but certain. "Then let me try to be more than what they say." Samuel nodded. "That's all I ask." Outside, the wind swept through the town, carrying whispers and rumors past the ranch gates. But within, Grace felt the first stirrings of courage, a quiet, fragile flame that would, with time, grow strong enough to face the world. The sky over the Hayes ranch darkened that evening, thick clouds rolling in like a warning. A storm was coming, and the wind swept across the plains with a feral energy that seemed to match Grace's racing heart. Inside the house, Emily helped Grace arrange the supper table, her small hands bustling with excitement. But Grace's mind wandered. She had sensed it all day, the uneasy silence in the fields, the faint dust clouds on the horizon that didn't belong to the usual travelers. Samuel noticed her unease. "Storm's coming," he said calmly, though his sharp eyes scanned the distant horizon. "Better batten down the fences. Make sure the livestock are safe." Grace nodded, but the familiar panic clawed at her chest. Storms, chains, fear. Always fear. Then came the sound of hooves, fast, insistent, and multiplied. Dust spiraled in the distance, heralding the arrival of men. Grace's breath caught. She instinctively moved toward the house, her hands clutching the edge of the table. Samuel stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. The men rode in, voices loud, filled with authority and menace. "Hayes, we've come for what belongs to us." Grace stumbled backward. Her mind froze. "Belongs to them? No, please, no." Emily ran to her side. "Mama, what's happening?" The word tore through Grace's chest. "Mama." She flinched. Memories of hands that hurt, voices that screamed, chains that bit into her wrists. Her knees buckled, and she fell to the ground. Samuel's voice rang out, strong and unwavering. "No one is leaving with her. Not while I'm breathing." The men laughed, their tone cruel. "You can't stop what's owed to us, Hayes. You'll regret this." Grace shook, sobs racking her small frame. Her body remembered every punishment, every night locked away in darkness. She tried to speak, but the words froze in her throat. "I cannot go back. I will die if I do." Emily tugged at Samuel's coat. "Daddy, is she dying?" The question, whispered through fear and innocence, hit him like a physical blow. He looked down at Grace, tears streaming down the girl's face at Emily's frightened eyes. He knelt beside them, placing a protective arm around both. "You are not dying," he said firmly, voice low but resolute. "Not while I am here. I promise you." The men on horseback bellowed threats, but Samuel's stance never wavered. He lifted the rifle, and for a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. The storm broke overhead, rain pattering against the wooden roof, mixing with the tension in the air. And then, almost as if recognizing the futility of their threats, the men retreated, spurring their horses back into the storm. Dust and rain swirled in their wake, leaving silence behind. Grace remained on the ground, shaking uncontrollably, sobs muffled against her hands. Samuel gently lifted her, holding her close. Emily pressed herself against Grace, whispering, "You're safe now. You're home." Grace's head rested against Samuel's chest, and for the first time in months, perhaps years, she believed it. The chains are gone, yes, but fear lingered, stubborn and persistent. Still, for the first time, someone had faced the world for her. Samuel brushed wet hair from her face, voice steady, almost tender. "Not while I am breathing, Grace. Not while you're under my roof. You are safe, and you will live." The storm raged outside, but inside, Grace felt the beginnings of peace, a fragile, trembling peace that whispered, maybe, just maybe, life could begin again. That night, as Emily curled beside her in bed and Samuel kept watch on the porch, Grace finally allowed herself to cry, not from fear, but from the relief of survival. Her first real tears in years, a release of everything she had endured and suppressed. For the first time, she slept knowing someone would not let her die. Not now, not ever. Spring returned to the Hayes Ranch with a soft, golden warmth that seemed to wash the past away. The storm had passed, leaving fresh green shoots across the fields, and for Grace, the days began to feel less like survival and more like living. Morning light poured through the windows as Grace stepped outside, Emily at her side. The girl chattered endlessly about school lessons, animals, and flowers, her enthusiasm infectious. Grace felt a flutter of something unfamiliar, hope. Samuel watched from the porch, arms crossed, but his eyes softened as he saw Grace laughing at something Emily said. It was a small laugh, hesitant but real. "You've changed the ranch, you know," Samuel said quietly when she approached later that morning. Grace looked up, puzzled. "Me?" "Yes," he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "The way you care for the animals, the way Emily talks about you. It's like you've been here your whole life." Her chest tightened. Praise was foreign, yet it felt good. She lowered her gaze, brushing her fingers along the fence post. I just want to help." "That's enough," Samuel said simply. "That's more than enough." The weeks became months, and Grace slowly claimed her place in the rhythm of ranch life. She learned to ride, her hands growing confident on the reins. She helped mend fences, feed the animals, and even tended the small garden behind the house. Each seed she planted became a small victory, a proof that life could grow again, even from ground scorched by fear. Emily became her constant companion and little teacher. One afternoon, the girl tugged Grace to a patch of wildflowers. "See? I told you they'd bloom. You made them grow." Grace knelt beside the girl, brushing dirt from her hands. A shy smile curved her lips. "I didn't make them, Emily. They had in them already. I just helped them remember how to." Emily's eyes sparkled. "Just like you." The words lingered, planting a warmth in Grace's chest. For the first time, she felt capable of being more than what she had been. More than a victim, more than a survivor. She could be whole. Nights, once filled with nightmares, began to hold quiet comfort. Samuel never forced her to confront her past, only stood guard when needed. Emily read to her often, their shared laughter becoming a balm that soothed the lingering shadows. One evening, after supper, Samuel found Grace seated on the porch steps, sewing a dress for Emily. The faint smile on her lips was steady, her hand sure. "You've done well, Grace," Samuel said softly, sitting beside her. She paused, needle in hand. "I'm learning," she admitted. I'm still afraid sometimes, but I'm trying. Samuel placed a hand on her shoulder. That's all anyone can ask of you. Fear doesn't make you weak. It's what you do with it that counts. Grace nodded, letting herself believe it. For the first time, she felt rooted, not just protected. The ranch was no longer just a refuge. It was home. And slowly, piece by piece, Grace was learning how to live again. The morning sun glinted off the courthouse windows, a stark contrast to the heaviness in Grace's chest. She had never imagined stepping inside such a building. Its wooden benches, high ceilings, and the stern gaze of the judge felt like a different world, one she had only glimpsed through fear. Samuel led her in, his hand firm on her back, steadying her. Emily clutched Grace's free hand, her wide eyes filled with worry. Grace's stomach knotted. Across the room, a group of men sat, papers in hand. Their eyes were sharp, cruel, and entitled. "We claim what is ours," one said, voice dripping with arrogance. "Legal ownership of this woman, by indenture papers. You've no right to keep her." Grace froze. The words were like knives, slicing through the fragile peace she had built. She thought of the chains, the beatings, the nights curled in darkness. She wanted to run, but where would she go? Samuel placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're not theirs. You are free. You're family here." Grace's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, but the words caught. Her fear was palpable, nearly overwhelming. Emily squeezed her hand, whispering, "Mama, don't let them take you." Something within Grace stirred. "I'm not property. I'm not chains. I am Grace." When her turn came to speak, her voice was a mere whisper. I will not go back." The courtroom fell silent. The judge leaned forward, eyebrows raised. "Speak clearly, young lady. Why do you refuse?" Grace straightened, summoning every ounce of courage she possessed. "I'm not property. I have a name. I have a life. I live now. I'm not going back." The words rang through the room, small but defiant. The men shifted uncomfortably in their seats, papers rustling like dry leaves. Samuel stood beside her, arms crossed, unwavering. "She is free," he said simply, eyes hard, "and she will remain under my protection. No chains can claim her again." The judge examined the papers, listened to both sides, then banged his gavel. "The court recognizes the freedom of the young woman before it. She is under no legal obligation to return to the claimants." Case dismissed. Relief crashed over Grace like a wave. She sank to her knees, sobbing, not from fear, but from the liberation she had fought for. Emily ran to her side, hugging her tightly. Outside the courthouse, Samuel lifted her into a protective embrace. The world beyond the walls seemed brighter somehow, full of possibility. Grace inhaled deeply, tasting freedom for the first time in her life. Emily skipped ahead, pointing toward the horizon. "Look, Mama, we're going home." Grace smiled, tears streaking her face. She took Samuel's hand, letting the warmth anchor her. "Yes," she whispered, "home." And for the first time, she felt it, not just the safety of the ranch, but the power of her own voice, her own choices, her own life. The past had returned, but it had no hold over her anymore. The sun dipped low over the Hayes Ranch, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. The air was warm, carrying the scent of fresh hay, wildflowers, and a faint tang of smoke from the evening fire. The ranch, once just a refuge, now felt like a home, alive with laughter, life, and belonging. Grace stood at the edge of the fields, Emily skipping ahead, her small fingers clutching Grace's hand tightly. Samuel watched them from the porch, leaning against the railing with a quiet smile. The weight of the past, the fear, the chains, all of it, felt distant here, softened by the safety and love surrounding them. "Look at this, Mama," Emily exclaimed, pointing to the flowers Grace had planted weeks ago. They were in full bloom, bright and stubborn, pushing through the soil as if daring the world to doubt them. "You made them grow." Grace knelt beside her, brushing a stray petal from Emily's hair. "We made them grow together," she said softly, the word we feeling right on her lips. It was the first time she truly felt part of something, part of family. Samuel stepped down from the porch, joining them. "Grace," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of pride and affection, "you've given more life to this place than I ever did." Her gaze lifted, meeting his. There was something tender in the way he looked at her. Not pity, not ownership, but genuine respect and admiration. "You gave me back my life first," she whispered. The evening air was filled with the sounds of the ranch. Horses nickering, chickens clucking, and Emily's laughter echoing across the fields. Neighbors had come to celebrate Grace's newfound freedom, offering small gifts, flowers, and warm smiles. The town that once whispered about her now nodded in quiet respect. Samuel extended his hand to Grace. "Stay," he said simply, not as a guest, but as family. Grace hesitated, the enormity of the moment settling over her. Then, with a trembling but sure voice, she replied, "Yes, I want to belong." Emily ran ahead, twirling among the wildflowers, shouting, "Mama, you're home. You're really home." Grace laughed, a pure, unrestrained sound that rose above the soft wind. She took Samuel's hand, feeling the steady strength beside her, and allowed herself to take in the horizon. For the first time, she saw the future as hers to shape, unbound by fear or chains. As the sun dipped behind the distant hills, Grace walked freely across the fields, Emily at her side, Samuel following behind. The chains that had once defined her existence were gone, replaced by something stronger: love, trust, and the unshakable truth that she had a name, a family, and a second life. Emily whispered, her voice soft against the evening breeze, "Daddy, she's not dying. She's alive." Grace smiled, truly smiled, and let herself believe it. And in that moment, with the golden light falling over them, the Hayes Ranch became more than a home. It became a promise, a sanctuary, and the beginning of a life Grace could finally call her own.